Today,
Welcome to Ultimate Mega Projects.
hey, I'm Jack Hyber, and today we're taking a deep look at one of the most geopolitically explosive infrastructure projects on Earth right now, Jask Oil Terminal, southern Iran.
On the 27th of May 2021, Iran did something that sent shockwaves through every oil trading floor, every sanctions enforcement office, and every U.S. Navy command center in the Middle East. They opened a valve. That's it. They opened a valve. And in doing so, they potentially made 40 years of American sanctions strategy obsolete overnight. See, for decades, the United States held what many considered the ultimate leverage over Iran, the Strait of Hormuz. That 21-mile-wide bottleneck of water is the single most critical oil choke point on planet Earth. Every single barrel of oil leaving Kuwait, Iraq, the UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia passes through it. Every single one. And Iran sits right on its northern shore, which means in any confrontation, Washington could threaten to close it or dare Tehran to close it and bring the entire global energy system to its knees. 21 million barrels of oil per day, every day, through a gap of water so narrow you could almost throw a stone across it. That was America's trump card. That was the geographical leverage that gave U.S. sanctions their teeth. And then China helped Iran build a pipeline that goes around it entirely. Welcome to Jask, the $3 billion oil terminal on the Gulf of Oman that nobody in Washington wanted built and that Beijing helped make happen.
Today, it is real. It is operational, at least partially, and it is directly connected to a 25-year, $400 billion strategic cooperation agreement between Iran and China that represents perhaps the most significant geopolitical partnership of the 21st century so far.
The most consequential event of the last decade traces back to one terminal. This is the human cost. Hormuz Trap. Today, sanctions power enforces the maximum pressure campaign.
Maximum pressure. We will tighten the
To
screws.
understand why Jask exists, you have to understand the trap Iran has been living inside for the better part of half a century. The Strait of Hormuz is Iran's greatest weapon and Iran's greatest vulnerability simultaneously. On one hand, Iran's coastline controls the northern shore of the strait. Tehran has repeatedly threatened to mine it, blockade it, or close it entirely in response to U.S. military pressure, a threat that sends oil markets into immediate panic every single time it's made. But here's the trap. Every Iranian oil export also passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Every tanker carrying Iranian crude has to pass through that same choke point, right past the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet based in Bahrain, right through waters patrolled by American destroyers and surveillance aircraft running 24 hours a day. This geographic reality gave U.S. sanctions their extraordinary power. When Washington tightened the screws on Iranian oil exports, and they have tightened them hard, particularly under the Trump administration's maximum pressure campaign, which targeted Iran's oil revenue down from $100 billion annually to under $10 billion, there was no escape route. Every buyer of Iranian crude risked being caught by U.S. surveillance. Every tanker was visible. Every transaction was potentially traceable. The Hormuz choke point made Iranian oil exports one of the most monitored and most sanctioned commodity flows on Earth. Iranian planners and engineers had been dreaming about an escape route since at least the 1990s, a pipeline that would carry crude oil from Iran's massive production fields in the interior, bypassing the Persian Gulf entirely, and deliver it directly to a new export terminal on the Gulf of Oman, outside Hormuz, out of reach of the most suffocating choke point in the global energy system. For decades, it stayed a dream. The engineering was brutal, The costs were enormous, and crucially, no major international company would touch it, not with U.S. secondary sanctions threatening to cut off any firm that helped Iran build it from the entire American financial system. And then, China signed a $400 billion deal, and the dream became a construction site.
Let's talk about the money, because the financial structure behind the Jask terminal is as audacious as the engineering itself. In March 2021, Iran and China formally signed what they called a comprehensive strategic partnership, a 25-year cooperation framework that Iranian officials described as covering trade, infrastructure, energy, industry, and defense cooperation. The estimated value? $400 billion over the life of the agreement. The broad terms, as reported by the New York Times, Reuters, and confirmed through Iranian parliamentary discussions, involve China investing in Iranian infrastructure, including energy projects, transportation networks, manufacturing, and telecommunications. In exchange, Iran provides China with deeply discounted oil, reported at somewhere between $5 and $12 per barrel below market price, as well as strategic positioning across Iranian territory that gives Beijing a foothold in the heart of the Middle East. Now, the full terms of this agreement have never been made public. Iran's parliament debated it in closed session. China's involvement has been characterized in deliberately vague language by both governments. Independent economists trying to model the actual financial flows describe it as, quote, deliberately opaque. But here's what we can confirm. Chinese companies, operating through intermediary firms specifically structured to reduce their exposure to U.S. secondary sanctions, have been directly involved in financing, engineering, and supplying equipment for the Goreh-Jask pipeline and terminal project. We're talking about a project that, under normal circumstances, would have been impossible to build without technology and capital that only the West could previously provide. China changed that equation entirely.
All right, this is the section I've been building toward, because the engineering of what Iran built at Jask, in the timeline they built it, under the conditions they built it, is, and I don't use this word lightly, extraordinary. Let's break it down system by system. Component 1, the Goreh-to-Jask crude oil pipeline. The foundation of the entire Jask project is a pipeline, but not just any pipeline. The Goreh-to-Jask crude oil pipeline stretches approximately 1,100 kilometers, that's 684 miles, across some of the most hostile terrain on the surface of the Earth. We're talking about a pipeline that crosses the Zagros mountain foothills, traverses vast stretches of the Iranian desert interior, where summer temperatures regularly hit 50 degrees Celsius, that's 122 degrees Fahrenheit, and then descends through the rugged coastal highlands of Hormozgan province before reaching the Gulf of Oman coast at Jask. Think of it like this. Imagine trying to thread a steel needle nearly 700 miles long through a landscape that alternates between rocky mountain passes, earthquake-prone geological fault zones, and scorching desert flatlands where the ground itself expands and contracts with temperature changes that would stress lesser engineering to breaking point. The pipe itself, with a diameter of 42 inches or just over a meter, was manufactured in sections, transported to some of the most remote construction sites in Iran, and welded together by teams working in conditions that would shut down construction sites in most of the world. Extreme heat, water scarcity, no road infrastructure in large sections of the route, supply chains operating entirely within Iran because no international logistics company would risk the sanctions exposure. Let's zoom out, because the strategic implications of Jask Terminal, even at partial capacity, are enormous. American sanctions on Iran operate on multiple levels. Primary sanctions prohibit U.S. companies and individuals from doing business with Iran. Secondary sanctions, the really powerful ones, threaten to cut off any company anywhere in the world from the U.S. financial system if they do significant business with Iran. Since virtually every major international transaction is denominated in US dollars and cleared through US correspondent banks, secondary sanctions give Washington extraordinary leverage over non-American companies. The result has been the rise of what analysts call the shadow fleet, a network of aging, often uninsured tankers operating under flags of convenience, with ownership structures deliberately obscured through shell companies, carrying Iranian crude to buyers willing to operate outside the dollar system, primarily China, India, Syria, and Venezuela. Here's the brutal reality that Washington doesn't love to advertise. Iranian oil exports have recovered significantly from their 2020 lows, with estimates suggesting Iran exported somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million barrels per day in 2023, largely to China, generating revenue that partially offset the most crushing effects of maximum pressure sanctions. Jask accelerates that trend dramatically. With an export terminal outside Hormuz, Iran can now load oil onto tankers that never have to navigate the most surveilled choke point on Earth. Chinese buyers, operating through trading companies deliberately structured to minimize U.S. sanctions exposure, can receive Iranian crude that has a cleaner, less traceable logistics trail. Furthermore, and this is the part that truly worries U.S. strategic planners, Jask is not just about oil exports. The terminal's position on the Gulf of Oman places it at the intersection of critical Indian Ocean shipping lanes. A fully developed Jask, which Iranian plans envision eventually including special economic zones, petrochemical facilities, and potentially naval infrastructure, could become a major node in the China-Iran strategic relationship that gives Beijing physical presence in a location of extraordinary maritime strategic value. The Indian Ocean is the next great arena of U.S.-China strategic competition, and Iran just put China on the board there, in exchange for the engineering and financial support that made Jask possible. The 25-year cooperation agreement has never been published in full. Iranian parliamentarians who demanded to see the complete text were reportedly denied access. The Chinese government has never officially confirmed specific investment commitments. Independent financial analysts trying to model the actual capital flows describe the transaction architecture as deliberately designed to be opaque, spread across multiple Chinese state-owned enterprises, routed through intermediary trading companies, and structured to minimize the visibility of Chinese fingerprints on Iranian infrastructure investment. Why does that matter? Because it means the true cost of Iran's dependence on China, the discount on oil, the terms of infrastructure loans, the concessions on Iranian sovereignty embedded somewhere in 25 years of secret agreements may be far higher than the official narrative suggests. One Iranian economist, writing in a reformist newspaper before it was shut down by authorities, described the China deal as trading one form of dependence for another. His newspaper was closed 6 weeks after publication. The human cost. And then there are the people of Jask. Jask is not empty desert. It is a town, a port community with a history stretching back centuries, a place where Baluchi fishing families have worked the Gulf of Oman for generations. A community that was told an oil terminal would bring prosperity, jobs, and development. Some of that has materialized. Construction brought employment, though as with Ream Naval Base in Cambodia, a significant portion of the technical workforce was brought in from outside, limiting local economic benefit. A new road connecting Jask to the national highway network was built. Some infrastructure improvements reached the town itself. But fishermen report disrupted fishing grounds from the SPM buoy installation and subsea pipeline construction. The coastal ecology of the Gulf of Oman near Jask, home to critically important coral reef systems and sea turtle nesting beaches, has been altered by construction activity. And the community of Jask itself now finds its quiet corner of the Iranian coast permanently transformed into an industrial export hub, with all the environmental and social disruption that entails.
quieter music. These are the people who never appear in the geopolitical analysis, who never get mentioned in the congressional hearings about sanctions evasion or Indo-Pacific strategy, but whose coastline, whose fishing grounds, and whose community were permanently changed by decisions made in Tehran and Beijing. Their story matters too. So, what has the United States actually done in response to Jask? Washington has responded with a sustained and largely unsuccessful campaign of secondary sanctions targeting the specific companies and vessels involved in Iranian oil trade. The U.S. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC, has sanctioned dozens of Chinese trading companies, shipping firms, and individual vessels identified as participating in Iranian crude transactions. But here's the fundamental problem with trying to sanction your way out of a structural geopolitical shift. China doesn't care about being cut off from the U.S. financial system the way a European bank does. Chinese state-owned enterprises have limited dollar exposure. Chinese trading companies operating in the Iran oil trade are specifically structured to be sacrifice pieces. Designated by OFAC, replaced by a new entity the following week, continuing the same transactions under a different name. It's geopolitical whack-a-mole, and the United States is losing. But the deeper strategic problem is this. Jask Terminal represents a physical, permanent piece of infrastructure. You can sanction companies, you can sanction ships, you can even sanction individuals. But you cannot sanction a pipeline buried under the Iranian desert. You cannot sanction an SPM buoy sitting in the Gulf of Oman. The infrastructure exists. It will continue to exist. And as long as China wants Iranian oil at a discount, it will continue to be used. Jask doesn't exist in isolation, just like Ream Naval Base doesn't exist in isolation. From the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, the $62 billion infrastructure program that runs from China's Xinjiang region down to the Pakistani port of Gwadar on the Arabian Sea, to the Power of Siberia pipeline, delivering Russian gas to northeastern China, to investments in Iraqi oil fields, Emirati LNG infrastructure, and now the Iran-China energy partnership anchored by Jask. Beijing has been systematically constructing what analysts call an energy Silk Road, a diversified, redundant, multi-pathway energy supply network that reduces China's dependence on any single source, any single route, and, critically, any single choke point that the United States Navy could threaten to close. Jask is one node in that network, but it is a strategically critical node because it also gives China physical presence in Iran, the country that sits at the geographic heart of the Middle East, that borders both the Persian Gulf and the Caspian Sea, and that has the fourth largest proven oil reserves and the second largest natural gas reserves on Earth. Getting access to that, even at a discount, even under the shadow of U.S. sanctions, even through deliberately opaque financial structures, is, from Beijing's perspective, worth every dollar of the $400 billion commitment.
This has been Ultimate Mega Projects. If this video gave you something real to think about, subscribe, share it with someone who needs to see it, and I'll see you in the next one.
Every frame in this video has been crafted through a multi-stage documentary production process, from original research and script development to AI cinematic visualization and professional editing. Human creativity guides every step. A digital documentary host and advanced visual tools are used to clearly explain complex mega projects, engineering, and global infrastructure. This channel is dedicated to original documentary storytelling and follows all EU policies regarding AI-assisted and synthetic media, ensuring the informative, unique, and monetization-friendly content.